Welcome to episode 7 of the Retro Baseball Game Challenge, where I'm playing and rating every old baseball video game I can get my hands on. And today I'm playing the GameCube exclusive Home Run King, developed by Sega. I don't remember ever seeing this game back in the day, so I'm sure it eluded a lot of people like myself, taking a backseat to some of the more popular franchises on the GameCube, like MVP Baseball 2005 or Slugfest or even Mario Superstar Baseball, all of which were received significantly better at the time, and games I will play through a little bit later on this challenge. But anyways, how will Home Run King hold up? Let's find out. When booting up Home Run King for the first time, we're introduced to a pretty killer intro song which feels straight out of the late 90s or early 2000s Sega era. Very fitting. Honestly, it's a banger and I'll play it throughout this video. It's not as memorable as the Ken Griffey Jr. theme song from my earlier video, but it's pretty good. Now at the main menu here, we are given a plethora of options right out the gate. Quick Start, Exhibition, Season, Home Run Derby, Playoffs, Player Create, and Customize, and we'll dive into most of these. For the sake of this video, I played a 15-game season to give it a full look, but until we do that, let's jump right into a quick exhibition game to give you a taste. There's something about the Diamondbacks color scheme from this era, by the way. Maybe it was their success with the World Series appearances, but they are the main team I will play as, but for at least this exhibition game, I chose my Pirates.
I know that once guys put on the uniform and step out between those white lines, they're playing hard and playing to win. Simple as that.
After we get past the game intro, you will notice that when hitting and pitching a baseball with a bunch of directional arrows pops up. Each arrow refers to a different kind of pitch, and stamina meter is tied to each of these arrows. They generally correspond to the real-life movement of a pitch as well. For example, a fastball might be the up arrow, or a changeup might be the down arrow, or a curveball might be one of the diagonals. Over time, you'll kind of have to have these memorized. After selecting a movement, you then pick the location with the control stick, and another meter pops up with how much energy you want to spend, which ties to the pitch speed. The pitch speed range is kind of dramatic and way more arcade-like, but later on I learned to love the huge variety of pitches you can throw using this mechanic. Of course, I didn't have this down right away and promptly gave up a 2-run home run to Jeff Kent in the first inning off the foul pole.
2 outs and a runner on first.
21. Jeff Kent.
It's going! A 2-run home run!
Well, that one left the yard in a hurry.
Now flipping the script over to hitting, and I was surprised to see the same baseball with arrows pop up at the start of every pitch. Well, as the hitter, this is the guess pitch mechanic, where you select the direction of which pitch you think it'll be. If you are right, the hitting zone, which is normally a small blue circle, turns red and becomes the oblong shape of the type of pitch you guessed correctly. This is really such a cool mechanic that I've never seen in a baseball game before. Obviously, it's more of an arcade style, but it feels like a perfect balance of rewarding a correctly guessed pitch, but still requiring you to do all of the work to capitalize on it. For example, in the Bigs 2, which was the first video I did for this challenge, once you powered up enough, you just kind of had to press the button at some point, and then you would hit a massive home run. And it didn't really feel all that rewarding. But in this game, you'll see it's still not that easy. It is generally hard to get good power contact in this game. I should mention that there is always a contact and power option if you press X or Y instead of A when hitting, but I kind of found the normal swing to produce more consistent power, with the power swing resulting in too many weak flyouts.
Ripped deep to left. It's over the left fielder.
Now, every older baseball game I've ever played has a very distinct feel, a lot of which comes from the ball physics. Home run cane has a slight floatiness of sorts to the entire experience, which does affect the types of hits that appear in the game. For example, having a ton of Texas fly leers way more than you would ever see in a real game. The game also plays a little bit slow once you make contact, which I don't know if you can tell from the gameplay. I mean, a lot of older retro games from previous generations were laughably slow, where it would take, say, like 15 seconds for an outfielder to track down a ball, but the runner would also take like 10 seconds to go from one base to another. Home run cane definitely does not play that slow, but it does lean that direction when comparing it to a modern baseball game. Something that never really went away throughout my time with it was the high quantity of infield singles. Or not so much infield singles, but hitting ground balls between the fielders. You would think a game called Home Run Cane would be overloaded with over-the-top bombs, but the hitting physics results in way more singles than anything else. And that was common again throughout my entire time with the game. This is another thing that kind of makes the gameplay a more simulation-style experience than an arcade one, despite what the title of the game is.
Shot up the middle.
Another thing that I noticed right out of the gate was the color commentary. It exists, but it is so incredibly boring, and the sound levels are just kind of way off. Its clear attention went to other parts of the game, and it almost would have been better off not to include it here. Well, I guess that's not exactly true, but the announcers just aren't good. They say the wrong names all the time, or just say the completely wrong things. Like here, that I've taken a lead when you've already had the lead, and things like this kind of happen all the time. Eventually, I just kind of tuned them out, and they ended up not being an important part of the game. Several notches below a game like, say, MVP Baseball 2005, which, to be fair, did come out a few years later after Home Run Cane.
The center fielder, the Arizona Diamondbacks, have taken the lead.
Fielding in the game is somewhat of a mixed bag. The game very frequently does not choose the right player. Animations tend to be kind of slow, and pressing B to tell the game you want to run instead of throw is a weird added step that just kind of gets in the way. In addition to the awkwardness, the game has what I'm calling dramatic fielding, where they always do a giant crow hop and are always moving after fielding a ball. In some of the footage here, you'll kind of see what I mean. It's like an animation that should be used once every like 2 or 3 games in a specific situation, but instead happens on almost every single routine play. That being said, you do get used to it, and it has some kind of charm when every infielder wants to make a Derek Jeter signature jump throw and leans more into the arcadiness that the game was being advertised to be. I should mention that dives are also very awkward, and fielders just kind of teleport to their feet. I think this just kind of shows how few animations there are, so you can kind of get locked into certain movements that feel unnatural. I'm not saying this to be critical of a game from 2002, it's just something I noticed while playing.
No outs and a runner on second.
25, Derek Lee.
The second baseman, Counsell to first.
I just wanted to point out some other random things after playing a few games that I noticed. For one, you can't bring up attributes of players when subbing or anything, so it's a bit of a guessing game when you're bringing in, say, a relief pitcher. I also enjoyed kind of this take me out to the ball game video here, which is just kind of a little presentation element that had some fun moments. Check out this home run into the Allegheny River as well. The developers took time to add a boat scene for fishing it out of the river, which is completely unnecessary but really cool. Which reminds me of kind of another thing, is that I think a lot of the hits are a bit too wind aided, and it plays a little bit too much of a factor. Anything over like 10-mile-per-hour winds makes the ball travel more like it would in like a golf game, which just isn't the most realistic. It's not absurd or gameplay altering, but I generally prefer the games with lower wind speeds. Now, I've been pretty positive about the game so far, and I have to mention again the hitting and pitching. They're fantastic, but easily the worst thing about the gameplay is the base running. They are atrocious. They get doubled up constantly on the base paths, and it's hard to select individual runners. The worst thing, though, is that they will always start running to the next base on contact, no matter what type of contact it is, and never tag up automatically. Even a measly little infield pop-up with any runners on base will have them taking off, so you're constantly fighting your own base runners not to get doubled off. The other thing I disliked about the game here is that there is no box score after the game. Just kind of a weird point system to enter in that keeps track of your totals, which I never really fully understood while playing. That's too bad, because one of my favorite things to do in any retro baseball game or any baseball game in general is to kind of keep an eye on stats, and either during the game or afterwards, especially in season mode. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the other gameplay modes. Here is some of the Home Run Derby footage, which, by the way, I love how the game gives everyone a Ken Griffey Jr. style backwards hat when playing. It again makes the game feel very true to the early 2000s. Season mode, which again is where I spend most of my time, is decent, but lacks a lot of the stat tracking that I usually like to see. Just kind of your basic league leaders are included here. So before I get to my final thoughts on the game, I thought for fun I would look up some detailed reviews of the game if I could find any, which IGN has one, and I'm honestly not sure we played the same game. They give it a 62, which is on the lower side, and I disagree with like half of the points made in the article. Now on Metacritic, there are critic scores ranging all the way from 40 all the way up to 86 from Operation Sports. And that's a huge range, but I have to lean more towards the review on Operation Sports. That review unfortunately does not exist anymore, so I can't see what they said specifically about the game, but the tagline from that review says, quote, "I got a lot more stimulation than I would have imagined." And that is absolutely spot on with how I feel about the game.
It's hit deep. That could go for extra bases.
I know I mentioned it at the top of the video, but Home Run Cane was a one-off from Sega. They had a separate 2K baseball series that never made an appearance on the GameCube, so Home Run Cane was just kind of this random game that existed. But Home Run Cane was released in 2002, which is the same year that Sega created a mobile division called Sega Mobile, which actually still exists today. In 2003, they released a basic game also titled Home Run Cane for phones, as well as Home Run Cane 2 in 2005. But this is the early era of cell phones, and obviously these aren't faithful recreations of the original games or anything like that, and they were basically just sharing the same name, and the gameplay itself, from what I can tell, was just like a home run derby type game. The only image I could find of either of them was from this GameSpot review in 2005, which also said the game was a broken mess and only playable on something called an LG VX7000, which looks like this. Anyways, I felt obligated to make note of these old cell phone games, since for the simple fact they shared the same name. And yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our final review, or our final scores I should say, of Home Run Cane on Nintendo GameCube. Alright guys, so let's start with hitting, and hitting in Home Run Cane is an awesome experience. It's really a perfect balance of give and take between trying to predict the right pitches, line up your batting cursor, and timing it right. When you do make good contact, it's as rewarding as any baseball game that I've ever played. And again, despite the title of the game, home runs are not overpowered at all, like they kind of are in the Bigs 2 game. Again, I reviewed for the first video on this channel, and it plays down to a more simulation style experience, which, while surprising, works extremely well. Now, pitching in Home Run King is almost as fun as the hitting and scores an easy B for me. The only thing that is kind of annoying is having to memorize each of the different arrows and which type of pitch it corresponds to. But I enjoyed pretty much every other aspect to it. It feels extremely balanced and complements the hitting perfectly. I don't think I've seen a baseball game come up with such similar interfaces with both the hitting and pitching, and it works and work as well as it does in Home Run King. Everything from the types of pitches, the movement, the cursor changing, the stamina tied to each pitch, which can be affected by how well opposing players hit off that pitch. All of it is fantastic, and it's an easy B grade for pitching. Alright, so for all the good Home Run King managed to pull off with its hitting and pitching mechanics, fielding and base running is kind of the complete opposite. It's not unplayable or something like that, but this category alone might even knock the game down an entire tier. Fielding is just kind of odd with some controls that are really dated, which again is understandable, but some of these goofy animations would have never felt right even in its time. Base running, though, is the worst part, and I wonder how it ever really got through testing. Again, runners just leaving on contact no matter the situation just seems so overlooked that I have no idea how that got past testing. It's not game breaking, you get used to it, but it's a constant battle to control your runners, and that's not how I want to spend my time when playing a baseball game. Now, presentation here, it's hard to judge. I mean, the early 2000s, the GameCube era, it's hard to go back and look and try to tell what was good visually and what wasn't. But I think it gets a middle grade here, a C for me. There's a lot the game does that is interesting and unique, but there are some glaring omissions that should have really been included in a game for its time. For example, they have really cool city-specific cutscenes and animations. My favorite, again, being when you hit a home run into the Allegheny River in Pittsburgh, there's an entire scene with boats going out and retrieving the ball. It's so unnecessary, but it is a cool thing. At the same time, though, when a game ends, there's no box score to even look at. The announcing team, which I mentioned earlier, is extremely rough, and the game has a lot of kind of janky animations. All of this stuff really could have been cleaned up with a true sequel, but unfortunately that Sega never got around to it, I guess. In terms of replay value, Home Run King presents a ton of things to do. Even if the season mode is a bit lackluster for simulation fans, it contains all the other classic game modes that any baseball fan would enjoy, like Home Run Derby and Create a Player. Honestly, you can easily sit back and play a full season and enjoy it to its full potential, which again is not something I would have expected with a game being advertised as an arcade baseball game from the early 2000s. Now on to my final grade for this game, and I have to say Home Run King is easily the biggest surprise of this series so far. I honestly never expected a one-off baseball game from Sega that was only released on the GameCube to be good. I mean, it never had a true sequel, and I've never heard anyone try to defend it before, like, ever, if they even heard of it in the first place. But the hitting and pitching mechanics are phenomenal, and even if the game is missing some quality of life, stat tracking, and I guess presentation elements, which you could argue is a bit egregious for even a GameCube era game, I was eventually able to look past this. I also think marketing the game as an arcade baseball game, even though it plays more like a simulation game, made for a confused buyer and was probably reflected in some of those scores we looked at earlier. Regardless, I could easily sit back again and play a full season of this with no major complaints, and I had a lot of fun playing it. I'll probably put it here as honestly, it's an easy B tier game. Hitting and pitching makes me want to bump it up higher than this, but yeah, everything else just kind of drags it down a bit. So I feel like a B grade is pretty good for those reasons. It's a significant step up from the Super Baseball Simulator we played and Bases Loaded 3 in the last video. But it's just not polished enough to be anything higher than that. Although if they ever made a sequel to this game, I could easily see it being like a classic. And again, the hitting and pitching, man, it's just top notch, and it's just something you have to play for yourself. And yeah, so let's go with the B grade here for Home Run King. And if you own a GameCube and are a baseball fan, there's no reason not to have this in your collection. Now, for my next game in this challenge, I'm gonna be playing this weird game called Baseball Blast for the Nintendo Wii. Why am I playing this game? Well, I just picked it up from the local game store, and I've never heard of it before. And I kind of enjoy playing games I've never heard of as much as retro baseball games that we know are going to be good. So going in kind of completely blind to this one. And anyways, subscribe today if you want to be notified for when that next episode releases, and I'll catch you guys next time.